Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into the life of Abraham Lincoln. It's this really extraordinary story, isn't it? How someone from, well, pretty much nothing, rose to become such a pivotal figure in American history. Our source material for this dive is some really compelling video excerpts called Abraham Lincoln, From Log Cabin to Legend, A Life That Shaped America.
Right. And our mission really is to pull out those key insights, those nuggets that show how Lincoln did it, how he navigated, immense personal loss and this huge national crisis, how he preserved the Union, changed the meaning of liberty, and just left this indelible mark. We want to unpack that resilience, that vision he had.
Okay, let's dive right in. The very beginning, February 12, 1809, a one-room log cabin, Hodgenville, Kentucky. His parents, Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln. Humble beginnings is putting it mildly.
Absolutely.
And then when he was just 7, right, 1816, the family moves to Indiana.
Yeah, it was mostly about land disputes back in Kentucky.
Sure.
But that move, it really shaped his early years, a tougher frontier life, perhaps.
Definitely. And then tragedy strikes early.
It really does. His mother, Nancy, died when he was only 9. I mean, imagine that. But then something quite pivotal happens. His father remarries Sarah Bush Johnston.
Ah, his stepmother. Right.
And she was crucial, absolutely crucial. She actively encouraged his reading.
Which was kind of unusual then, especially for someone in their situation.
Very much so. And that support for self-education, you could argue it, really fostered this independent way of thinking that served him so well later.
And speaking of education, his formal schooling was, well, almost nothing.
Less than a year, they say. Total.
Incredible. But he just devoured books, didn't he? Self-taught. The Bible, Aesop's Fables, Shakespeare.
Some of the classics.
What does that tell us? That drive.
Well, I think it shows this incredible innate curiosity. But also, by reading those particular texts, he wasn't just learning facts. He was absorbing language, rhetoric, different ways of looking at the world. It gave him this amazing command of language and maybe a kind of practical wisdom, not just book smarts tied to formal schooling. He learned how to think, how to argue.
Which definitely came in handy later.
No kidding.
Before politics, though, he did all sorts of jobs. Rail splitters, farmhand.
Store clerk, flatboat down the Mississippi, real hands-on work.
Yeah, it connects him to the sort of everyday person, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then he moves to Illinois in 1830, settles in New Salem. That's where he gets the nickname Honest Abe.
Right, the story's about him walking miles to return a few cents.
Exactly. It shows that integrity was there from the start. And interestingly, he even had a business fail, went bankrupt.
Which might have broken some people.
But for him, it seems like it just built more resilience, more grit for the bigger challenges ahead. And all this time, he's also teaching himself law.
Amazing. So this groundwork is laid, and then he steps into politics formally.
Right. 1834, Illinois State Legislature. A Whig.
And at the same time, that law career is taking off.
Yep. Self-taught again. Passes the bar in 1836. And he quickly gets his reputation, doesn't he? Brilliant debater, very persuasive lawyer.
Logical, clear, relatable to juries, apparently.
Sets up his practice with William Herndon in Springfield, handles all sorts of cases.
And his early political views, what was he pushing for back then?
Well, things like internal improvements, roads, canals, that sort of thing. Education was big for him, too. But really significantly, even early on, he was voicing opposition to the expansion of slavery.
That thread starts early.
It does. It becomes central later, but the seeds were there.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. His personal life. He marries Mary Todd in 1842.
And she comes from a very different background.
Totally different. Wealthy Kentucky family, slave-owning family.
Yeah.
Quite the contrast to his log cabin origins.
Really is. And their family life, well, it was filled with joy, but also just profound tragedy.
4 sons, right? Robert, Edward, Willie, and Tad.
Yeah, but only Robert lived to be an adult, losing 3 children. It's hard to fathom.
Especially Willie dying in 1862, right in the White House during the war.
The strain must have been immense, leading a country at war while dealing with that kind of personal grief.
Yet somehow he remained devoted to family, to the country.
It speaks to a depth of character, kind of inner strength that's just remarkable.
So after the Illinois legislature, he does a brief stint in Washington.
Yeah, 1 term in the U.S. House, 1847 to 49.
And then he actually steps back from politics for a bit.
He did, return to his law practice, but the whole national argument over slavery just kept escalating.
And that pulled him back in?
It seems so. I mean, you have to ask, what was it about that issue? It wasn't just politics. It felt like a real moral conviction for him. He saw slavery, especially its spread, as a fundamental threat to what the nation was supposed to stand for.
Which brings us to, well, a really defining moment. The Lincoln-Douglas debates in 1858.
Absolutely pivotal. He's running against Stephen Douglas for the Senate seat in Illinois.
And he loses the election.
He does lose the Senate race, yeah. But the debates themselves, they put him on the national map.
Huge exposure. People across the country are reading about his arguments, his stance against slavery's expansion.
Exactly. He masterfully articulated his views. And this was right in the context of huge national controversies.
Like the Kansas-Nebraska Act.
Right, which allowed settlers in territories to decide on slavery themselves, potentially expanding it. Lincoln fiercely opposed that.
And the Dred Scott decision.
The Supreme Court decision that basically said African Americans weren't citizens and Congress couldn't ban slavery in the territories. Lincoln saw these as moral failings and direct attacks on the nation's founding principles. His opposition really resonated.
So he's now a major national figure, which leads to 1860.
The Republican nomination, he wasn't the favorite going in, was he?
No, definitely seen as more of a dark horse, a moderate anti-slavery option compared to some others. But he gets it.
He does. And then, in November 1860, he's elected the 16th president.
From log cabin to White House, it's just an incredible arc.
Truly extraordinary, but he barely had time to settle in.
No kidding. Takes office March 1861.
And boom. April 1861, Fort Sumter is attacked. The Civil War begins.
Talk about inheriting a crisis.
Right from day one. And his primary goal, initially at least, was crystal clear. Preserve the Union.
Ending slavery wasn't the main war aim at the start.
Not explicitly. That was a pragmatic approach, to keep the border states loyal, to unify the North as much as possible around the idea of union. But as the war dragged on, his thinking evolved. Strategy and morality started to align more closely.
And the pressure on him must have been unbelievable.
From every direction, right? You had radical abolitionists wanting immediate emancipation. You had conservatives worried about going too far. You had generals who weren't winning.
Yeah, constant pressure, the weight of the nation on his shoulders.
And Elizabeth made some really tough calls because of it. Suspending habeas corpus, for example.
Which was hugely controversial, allowing the government to detain people without trial.
Definitely controversial. Raises big questions about presidential power in wartime. But Lincoln argued it was necessary, an extraordinary measure for an extraordinary time to deal with dissent and keep the Union together.
It shows how high the stakes were.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there was the whole challenge of finding the right military leader.
Went through quite a few generals, didn't he? McClellan, Burnside, Hooker.
Yeah, a frustrating search. He needed someone who understood it wasn't just about maneuvering, but about, winning decisively.
Until he landed on Ulysses S. Grant.
Finally, Grant had that relentless driving focus that Lincoln realized was needed to actually end the war.
Okay, so the war is raging. And then comes a truly defining moment. January 1st, 1863.
The Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah.
Monumental.
Declaring slaves in the Confederate territories free.
Legally free, yes. It didn't instantly free everyone, of course, but its impact was profound.
How so? What was the biggest shift?
Well, it fundamentally changed the purpose of the war. It wasn't just about preserving the Union anymore. Now, it was also explicitly a fight against slavery, a fight for freedom.
That's a huge moral shift.
Huge. It changed the narrative, energized the abolitionist cause, allowed black soldiers to enlist the Union Army in large numbers, and shifted international opinion, too. It really redefined what the war was about.
And then later that same year, November 1863, another iconic moment, Gettysburg.
The Gettysburg Address. Just incredible.
It's amazing how short it is. 272 words.
Barely a few minutes to deliver. Yet it's considered one of the greatest speeches ever.
Why do you think it resonates so powerfully?
It just perfectly captured the meaning of the sacrifice made there. It connected the war back to the founding ideals of equality and self-government. And that closing line, government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Goosebumps. Still gives you chills.
It really does. It crystallized what was at stake, democracy itself.
So, despite all the hardship, the length of the war, the losses, he gets reelected in 1864.
Which is pretty remarkable, given the war weariness and the opposition he faced. It showed that, despite everything, a majority still trusted his leadership to see it through.
And by April 1865, the end is finally in sight.
Yes. The Confederacy is collapsing, generally surrenders at Appomattox. The war is essentially over.
And Lincoln's already thinking ahead, about Reconstruction.
Yeah, his focus immediately shifts to how to bring the South back into the Union, peacefully.
That famous phrase from his second inaugural address, with malice toward none, with charity for all.
Exactly. He wanted healing, not revenge. A reunification based on forgiveness and moving forward.
Such a forward-looking vision.
And then, the tragedy.
Just days after Lee's surrender, April 14, 1865, Ford's Theater.
Assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, he dies the next morning.
The first U.S. president assassinated.
The timing is just heartbreaking, isn't it? Just as the war ends, just as he's laying out this vision for a reunited, healed nation, he's struck down. His plan for Reconstruction never fully realized by him.
So looking back at his legacy, the abolition of slavery has to be paramount.
Absolutely. Solidified by the 13th Amendment, which passed Congress shortly before his death and was ratified later that year, ending slavery was his most profound, concrete achievement.
And of course, preserving the Union itself.
That was his driving goal from the start. His leadership, his political skill, his sheer determination held the country together through its absolute darkest hour.
It's why he's consistently ranked, right at the top, one of America's greatest presidents.
Without a doubt, the Lincoln Memorial in D.C. isn't just a monument, it's a symbol.
Right.
A symbol of what, do you think? Integrity, leadership through crisis, unity, resilience. He embodies so many core American ideals, even the contradictions sometimes.
So wrapping this up, it really is an almost unbelievable journey. Poverty to the presidency.
Self-educated, facing constant adversity.
Preserving the nation, freeing millions, redefining American ideals. And even after his death, his words, his vision, they still echo.
They really do. Lincoln wasn't just a president, was he? He was almost like the embodiment of the nation's struggle, its conscience, maybe during that incredibly divisive time. Searching for hope, for justice, for a way to be whole again.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. How one person, with that kind of moral clarity and, frankly, toughness forged through incredible hardship, could so fundamentally change history. And maybe the provocative thought for listeners today is, when we face deep divisions, what parts of Lincoln's character are most needed? His empathy, his strategic patience. That ability he had to articulate a purpose higher than the immediate conflict, something to chew on,